Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2023 film Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and this is taking something from a lot of people's childhoods and turning it into basically a nightmare, but a joyful nightmare for some of us. I'll just tell you up front, I thought this was pretty solid for what it is. You can't go into this, or a film like this, expecting that it's going to be something amazing, something phenomenal, especially story-wise. It's basically a slasher, but it's a Winnie the Pooh slasher. So, does that sound fun to you? Then yes, you should watch it if it sounds at least relatively fun to you. So anyway, let's get into this one. Written and directed by Rhys Frake-Waterfield, who produced a bunch of movies. This was their first directorial credit. They produced, and this is only some of them, just listen to these titles: Fire-Nado, Dinosaur Hotel 2, Wrath of Van Helsing, and The Curse of Jack Frost. That's just naming a few. Go look at his IMDb page. There's a bunch. This was made possible by the fact that the A.A. Milne property of Winnie the Pooh finally became public domain just last year. And I remember that as soon as that happened, the news that this movie, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, was being made hit a lot of news outlets, like, immediately, because it's this salacious thing a lot of people find, you know, making a horror film out of something that was like a kid's property. They find that to be like disgusting and shocking, and I'm all for it. I think it's fun to kind of like move it into a different realm, especially once it hits public domain. So for us horror fans, I know most of us were pretty delighted at that, but a lot of other people were shocked. There was a lot of pearl clutching going on, and oh no, not Winnie the Pooh, not him. But yeah, Piglet too, by the way. So synopsis, there isn't a whole lot to say synopsis-wise. I will tell you the backstory on this that's most likely in the trailer, which I have not watched, and even though I watched the movie, most likely already in the trailer, and it happens. It's given its backstory like within the first minute. Like, it's immediate that they tell you the backstory here, which I think is actually a pretty cool backstory, in my opinion, to take this old, beloved property and turn it into something else. So basically, it goes off the supposition that everything that's already happened with Winnie the Pooh was correct. Everything you've already seen in the old cartoons was accurate. That Christopher Robin was having a good time with Winnie the Pooh and all the friends, and everything was very jovial. But we pick up in this movie where Christopher Robin has gone away, has gone to college, and things have gone bad. Basically, the inhabitants of the 100-Acre Woods have become feral in a sense, and gone beyond feral to the point where they are homicidal, because things have really spiraled. And that's where we pick up. Sound like a good premise? Yeah, it's pretty solid. So that's all I'm going to do for synopsis. Legitimately, that backstory I thought was very intriguing. It really hooked me in the beginning, and they do a really cool thing at a few parts in the movie, early on only, where they use this kind of like crude animation. Not crude in the sense that it looks bad, but crude in the sense that it's very stripped down. It's very simplistic. So maybe that's a better way to put it. Very simplistic animation to give the backstory of what was going on, but then also there's another moment where they switch over into that. I like the use of that, even though it is kind of like bare bones animation. I think it works a lot for what it is. It's very bleak in the way it looks, and it has this kind of creep factor to it, so it plays well into the movie. Unfortunately, this movie does have that overused bleached color palette that's being used a lot in horror movies. It's just very overdone. Everything is extremely drab. Everything's really dark. With this movie, though, I understand the whole dark aspect, because you don't want people to see Winnie the Pooh and others in bright light, because the costuming is not great. Like, this is not a high-budget movie, and that's fine. So you have to know going into it that, it's people in masks. You're going to be able to tell that they're kind of masks if it's very well lit. And they do a good job of keeping those actors away from too direct of light, that would kind of expose the fact that it does look like a mask that's going on there. So I think they did a pretty good job with that. It's kind of all they had to work with. The reveal of the Hundred Acre Woods residence is solid when you do actually see Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. They look okay, but their mouths do barely move, unfortunately. So if that's something that bothers you, you might have a little bit of a problem with it. I didn't have that much of a problem with it just because I knew what I was getting into. I knew what to expect. Like, this is low budget. That's kind of what you're going to get, and that's fine for me. A relatively basic animation. Oh, no, I'm not going to talk about that because I already did. I jumped ahead of myself. There is some rough CGI in this. There is CGI used. It does not look great, unfortunately, although they do that, but they also throw in a bunch of practical blood. So that's good, and a lot of the kills do look practically done. They just kind of fill in some blood here and there with some CGI. And unfortunately, the physics of how the blood flows does not look right, which is why I'm saying the CGI doesn't look great. But that happens with a lot of movies, so, just expect it. And like I said, it's a lower budget film, so you kind of expect that stuff. At least I do. I do like how they use sound design to increase brutality of the kills, because the kills, for the most part, some are pretty good in what they show brutality-wise, but some others aren't. They don't show a whole lot, but they use that sound design to their advantage to kind of increase the feeling of how brutal it is, even though the brutality is kind of off camera a little bit. So I do like that. I thought that was very smart filmmaking. The acting, actually good for what you would think this movie is. To be honest, the acting is probably better than what this movie would deserve, or what people would think this movie deserves from an acting standpoint. So I think they did a good job casting it. I think it's very commendable that the actors really took it seriously, because with a movie like this, there can be a tendency for actors to kind of be like, okay, we know what we're doing. We know this is kind of like a whatever movie, so we're not going to try too hard. But no, they did what they could, and I appreciate that. They do manage to make an aspect of it legitimately sad. I was actually very surprised by that aspect. I found myself getting, not overly so, but a little bit emotional at a certain point in the movie, that I was just like, man, this actually, it has a little bit of a sadness to it, which you can see where that would end up being based off kind of what the setup is for the movie. So, yeah, I wasn't expecting that, and get a little bit of the feels in there. Lighting gets used pretty well to create some creepy looking scenes in this. And mainly speaking, they did some really cool stuff with a lot of interesting backlighting. Also, from a cinematography standpoint, looked pretty good for the most part. Directorially, pretty well handled, all that stuff. So it looks pretty solid. Audio levels are too low at times, so it is kind of hard to hear what's being said sometimes. So it appears they did have some audio issues from time to time. It's not consistently an issue, so for the most part, it won't really bother you. But every now and then, you'll kind of be like, what is this person saying? Because the audio kind of fluctuates a bit too much, so that's a bit unfortunate, but it doesn't detract too much from the movie, I don't think. There is a solid amount of blood in this. Between the CGI and the practical, I believe there is more of the practical blood, that, nice fake blood. Yeah, there was a good amount used, especially towards the end, which would make sense, because in the finale, for a movie like this that is basically a slasher, that's what you want. You want the blood flowing, especially for a movie like this. If this movie didn't deliver brutal kills and a good amount of blood, I think a lot of people would end up being very disappointed in it. And so it did what was basically expected. The ending is okay. I didn't love the ending. I think maybe it was drawn out a little bit too much. And this movie was like an hour and 20 some minutes, somewhere in there, less than an hour and a half. So it doesn't overstay its welcome, but it does have a tendency to drag a little bit here and there. Not too terrible, though. The pacing's not too off. But yeah. Interesting thing about this movie, I feel like it can actually play out as a rebuke of how humans inappropriately get involved in the lives of animals. If you think about the movie from that standpoint, it's a little more profound, and I don't know if that was intended or not, or if that's just something I kind of placed on the movie. It's probably something I just placed on the movie, but in my mind, it works really well to kind of approach it that way and think about it that way, because it has more impact, it means a little bit more, and it's a bit more interesting in that sense. But overall, I enjoyed it enough. I didn't think it was a phenomenal film or anything, but out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give it a real solid 3-star rating. I think it's, for what it is and what they did, I think 3 stars is pretty good, especially based off of what expectations would be for a movie like this. I think that's a pretty solid achievement. Also, I want to say that there is honey that comes up in the movie, and it's disgusting. And I appreciate how they made honey disgusting in this movie. So I did slightly consider going to 3.5 stars because I am kind of impressed with how they were able to make things turn out with this property. But I think it is more appropriate at a 3. But I would love to hear other people's thoughts on this one. Go ahead and put it down in the comments. Oh, also t-shirt shout out, because I'm trying to do this when I think about it. Yeah, an Attack the Block shirt, which if you haven't seen Attack the Block, you have to see this movie. It's amazing. Also, it glows in the dark, which is sweet. And if you've seen the movie, you get it. You know why. But anyway, again, comments down there. Let's talk about this movie or any horror movie. That's fine. Also, do me a favor and hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would greatly appreciate that. Also, hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up my new videos, and I'm doing 3 a week at this point. So, thank you, everyone. Also, are there any newer movies that I'm missing reviewing at this point that people really want me to get to? Because I'm probably not going to get to all the new movies for 2023. I'm trying to do as much as I can, but if there are ones that people particularly want, put it in the comments, and I'll try to see if I can kind of push those up to the top. But oh, and for anyone who wants to know, I watched Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey through Vudu. I just rented it with taxes. It's like $5 and some change. Well worth it. So anyway, thank you everyone for checking out this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.